Gusipsi barana bistronaczki, tuk, tuk, jak stugaka zagula, tuk, tuk, ta zagula, abdugaya, briga, varibala, tuk, 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 gusipsi barana bistronaczki, tuk, tuk, jak stugaka zagula, tuk, tuk, ta zagula, abdugaya, briga, varibala, tuk, tuk.
Of course, it was really the first piece in a new genre which we have come to call music theatre, which is using all the elements of theatre, but actually to embody a completely abstract piece of music. It's very difficult to produce, of course. There's a kind of carnival atmosphere and a license about this piece, which, I mean, it isn't very much concerned with stylistic categories, and so it doesn't fit very well into our solemn opera houses. The venues aren't quite right for it. Well, the piece is pure fun, and of course the staging should reflect this. The American composer Elliott Carter was actually privileged to go into Stravinsky's studio. He asked Stravinsky, how do you compose? And Stravinsky straight away showed him books of musical sketches and a large blank piece of paper in the middle of the room. He says, I make musical sketches, I tear them out of the sketchbook, I put them on the blank piece of paper, and I shuffle them about until I find an order which satisfies me, and then I paste them down. Now, in musical terms, that is a new way of organizing musical time, to integrate an ensemble of musical objects into a pattern with nothing but sheer sensibility to guide you. That was entirely new in Stravinsky. Igor Stravinsky, born 1882 in Oranienbaum near St. Petersburg, where his father was principal bass at the Imperial Opera. From the start, he was intimately connected with the theatre, around which so much of his creative work would be organized. The early part of his career is inseparable from that of the great impresario Sergei Diaghilev and his Russian ballet. Before 30, Stravinsky had produced for Diaghilev in rapid succession 3 great ballets, The Firebird, Petrushka, and The Rite of Spring, which rocketed him to fame and remain his best-known scores. Stravinsky said that the music of Renard begins in the verse. He put himself in compositional training for the piece, setting to music Russian nonsense verse called pribayutki, rather like our limericks, he says. And he had discovered to his delight that in popular tradition, when these jingles were sung, the natural spoken accents of the verse could be ignored, so that the musical accents could be shifted about at will. There is a pribayutki in the middle of Renard. It was the first bit to be composed. But even the rest of the text assembled around it, from story fragments taken from a famous collection of Russian folk tales, is treated in this way by adding or subtracting or simply repeating syllables from words at will.
It's interesting that also we don't always sing whole words. We have rhythms, phonemes, vowels. There's a lot of that in this what you call the Pribayutki section.
Well, they were old popular poems from a long time ago. He thought they'd come into being because of a kind of game that people played, a kind of consequences with words. Yes. Somebody said a word and another person said a word. And of course it went as fast as possible. You had no idea what was coming next. No. And he said, of course, the sequence of sounds and rhythms that this produced, which were always unexpected, you had no idea what was happening. He said it set up feelings in him similar to those provoked by music.
Yes. I mean, I think you probably can't translate a limerick, and just as I don't think you could possibly sing this in any other language than Russian and the phonemes of Russian. Is that right?
That's right. Because eventually what happens is that the words are nothing more than an abstract pattern of sounds and rhythms.
Yeah. Shall I give you a bit of this Pribayutki as it comes to me?
Please do.
Ciok, ciok, castrunato zagula. Ciok, ciok, da zugula, a drugая приговаривала. Ciok, ciok, первая док чучелка, а вторая почучелка.
It was a combination of two things, really. Some of the piece has a very strong underlying pulse. For instance, if we take an example, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which everybody knows, pa-pa-pa-pom, then it goes on, pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pim. This underlying pulse is there, or it could be Colonel Bogey, ba-dum, ba-da-da. You can beat time to it all the time. But there are certain sections where he'll take an idea like Beethoven's Fifth, pa-pa-pa-pom, and he'll put on 2, 3, 4, 5 notes onto the beginning. So instead of pa-pa-pa-pom, we might have pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pom, where the pulse becomes pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pom. You get a 2 plus 3, or you may put 3 on the front of that. Pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pom. So you have pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pa-pom. And then he makes that even quicker, and sometimes brings them together, sometimes expands them. So the underlying pulse starts to shift. So instead of the listener being able to just tap his foot, he sometimes has to tap it a little quicker, sometimes a little slower.
And the whole piece is actually constructed by playing with these different rhythms and balancing them, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
You can analyse the entire piece along those lines, along rhythmic lines, as well as along melodic and harmonic.
Was he the first person to construct an entire piece in this way?
I believe so. I've thought and thought. I can't think of an earlier example of anybody doing this. And, of course, into it comes this innate Russian characteristic, which is very much Stravinsky.
Every piece by Stravinsky has its own special sound, but the palette of sounds assembled for Renard is particularly fascinating. Stravinsky relates how it was inspired by an instrument called a guzla, which is a museum piece now, but was rare even in his St. Petersburg childhood. Evidently, it was a kind of balalaika, but strapped over the player's head, like the tray of an ice cream lady in the cinema. Guzli means string music played by human touch, and Stravinsky says that part of the fun in Renard is this extremely nimble-fingered instrument should be played by the cloven-hoofed goat. The guzla music was in fact the first bit of the piece to be composed. In 1914, Stravinsky was in a Geneva restaurant and happened to hear this instrument, a cymbalom. He decided that the cymbalom could be used as a substitute for the obsolete guzla. He went so far as to buy one for himself and learnt to play it. And he tells us that Renard was actually composed on it, as he normally composed on the piano, 2 sticks in his hand, writing as he composed. This is part of his attempt to conjure a real peasant world with real peasant sounds. And just as the cymbalom is a substitute for the guzla, so the sound of the entire instrumental group is an intensification of the raw and unsophisticated quality of the cymbalom. The cymbalom hammers out its notes with machine-like precision, and that mechanical effect in the whole ensemble is the unique sound world of Renard. Looking close up at the rhythm, the effort, the regularity which pulses through the whole piece, sharp, crisp, regular, metallic. They're all words you could apply to this piece and to many others written by our composer. You almost don't have to hear the music. You can see and then imagine how it sounds. Terry, one of the many surprises of this piece at a first hearing is Stravinsky's peculiar use of the human voice. Can you tell us something about this?
Yes. Well, the first thing to say is that he actually asks at the beginning of the score that the soloist should stand within the orchestra. And I can't think of an earlier example of that in music. However, it becomes apparent why he does it, because he does use us. Like instruments, he doesn't ask us always to sing a story or to perform an aria. And for instance, my first entry, nearly, is this enlightening tune. Ina jiska zdesa, igo jiska zdesa, iza rieshum zdesa, ipa vzesum zdesa.
Which is exactly what the cellos and basses are playing
That's
at the
right.
same time.
That's right, yes.
In fact, you're just physical instruments, really,
Yes,
aren't you?
yes. I don't think there's any intention that we should take on the role of characters.
No, and in fact, no one soloist is attached to one
No.
character on the stage. That's
No,
correct,
that's right.
isn't it?
That's right.
And sometimes you sing in duet,
Oh, yes.
and
yes.
sometimes the characters are shared, the actual ones on the
right.
stage are shared between
Absolutely.
the voices,
Yeah.
and also occasionally you're just narrating fragments of story,
Yes.
or just commenting on the
That's
action.
right. That's right. I mean, there are sections that are more like arias, but they're burlesque. I mean, they're parody.
Can you give us an example
Well,
of one of those?
there's a marvellous section which the tenor sings, which is really rather like, I imagine, a Russian Orthodox church chant.
And that, of course, is the point at which the fox comes on dressed as a nun,
That's right. Absolutely.
persuading the cock to confess his sins.
Yes.
Stravinsky said Renard was imbued with the spirit of mountebank buffoonery, and he describes it on the score as a burlesque. To us now, burlesque means the old American down-to-earth variety theatre, comedy, music, exotic sets and lights, pretty girls, strippers, pure tit and bum thrice nightly, stuff that exists in very few places now. And whilst all this is not exactly what Stravinsky had in mind, he was trying to situate this piece away from the straight legitimate theatre and into some more popular, earthy location. And nearer to original ideas of burlesque, Renard is full of all sorts of good-natured send-ups, mockeries. So, it mocks our concert and opera-going conventions. The orchestra is not in the pit, but comes on with everybody else and is visible throughout, in concert clothes. Its dislocation and rough theatre are a specific mock of the music drama, the total artwork of Wagner, and the rites with which it is celebrated in the temple of Bayreuth. It mocks the conventions that govern our understanding of the relationship between stage illusion and the real world, in that the audience sees a performance, a deliberate action, with the mechanism of all the effects visible. Renard comes from the period in Stravinsky's career when, for the first time, he was detached from the Diaghilev world.
Ach, ty kanalja! Tak puśćcie ty biazieri idiot!
It's important to remember that though for us, particularly in the West, Russian art of this period seems largely to be represented by this spectacular Diaghilev venture, there was an entirely separate artistic life going on back in St. Petersburg, Stravinsky's home. In fact, it was an artistic outburst of revolutionary proportions, of all manner of experimentation. The great event of the winter season of 1913 was the futurist opera, Victory Over the Sun, a really bizarre hybrid with sets by the painter Malevich, quarter-tone music by Matyushin, and, interestingly, a libretto consisting of nonsense words, cut-ups of syllables by the poet Kruchenik. And also, the great Russian theatre director Meyerhold had just published his manifesto, The Fairground Booth, which called for a regeneration of theatre by emphasizing its visual, non-verbal aspects, and which recommended for this purpose a return to pantomime and the skills of the Kabotins, performers of the old Russian buffoon theatre, acrobats and knockabout comedians. That's right. He's playing all the time between the idea of order and disorder. It's important that the order is experienced as being produced out of this disorder. The disorders in the discontinuity of the actions and the detachment of all the different means of human expression, whether it's words or sound or movement, into a set of raw materials. And of course, in the carnival license of the whole thing, the buffoonery, which disrupts every convention and every illusion so that the audience simply sees an exposition of theatrical techniques. There's no continuous storyline, there's no narrative involvement, there's no character development, there's no ethical or social special pleading, anything like that. And the order and the involvement is all with the musical process. He constructs an absolutely rigid frame, a very disciplined, mechanical, emotionally controlled pattern in this piece. The emotional control comes from the detachment and from the sort of dispassionate nature of all the human actions. And the discipline comes in the music, from this endless play of rhythms and from the absolutely precise balance of each musical fragment.
Pani slabina lisa, pani slapitucha, a kruty pieryszka, a wysoki gara w czudzi ziemi. Palioki ja spradi zawidziewy ciebie, cica, to je caso, i cica, to je gasu dafa.
The story of Renard can best be understood as a sequence of events. Event 1, march, to accompany the entrance of the players. Event 2, all is not well in the farmyard. The cock expects trouble. Event 3, Renard's first attempt at the kill. The cock has many wives. This is wrong. Disguised as a nun, the fox requests that he come down from his perch for confession. Event 4, the first salto mortale. Event 5, Renard goes to kill the cock, who requests help from the cat and the goat, who in turn free him. Event 6, the cat and the goat dance and introduce the second attempt at the kill, a surprise attempt whilst the cock is out walking with his wives. Event 7, this time the cock saves himself by offering his wives as Renard's meal. Event 8, the third attempt at the kill, with another style of seduction. Renard points out she is much better and sexier than any of the wives the cock has at that moment. The seduction succeeds. Event 9, second salto mortale. Event 10, again, Renard savages the cock. This time, no one helps. Event 11, time for light entertainment. Accompanying themselves on the guzla, the cat and the goat do a song and dance routine. Event 12, back to reality and time for the moral. Even Renard must pay for her fun. Event 13, the animals again have more pressing concerns, hunger and rain. Event 14, the march played again whilst the actors make their exit.
a dziwo disa. Ja nie ma jeździca winnica, pliki wolna winnia.
Держите же помогу, кто держите сочон, иный держит всегда сочон, прибивается временем до сорога. Красная заничала, и Сильвия величала. Он не пилли, зубки лопни, уся схвативала головни.
Скотвинчет поксала,
За двора,
скотвинчет поксала,
за собой.
Ковачек и лошадчик,
Открутала солисицию, открутила за красная хвосточала, и чичучало мордала. Чаварсея, шептаеся, стыдливо почитаеся.
ешь меня, лисенька,
Ешь меня, красная. Не будет из тебя кулачек, ушатик.
ехала Джуня за Ивана, а Джуни души давала.
senza gallone, sapiello io mi rozzo. Che corre, che adesso il shot.
Pani slawina lisa, pani slawitucha, a kruti pierieśka, a wysoki garach, kija ziemi, daleki jasny, zawiedziemy ciebie, ty zawsze je zawsze, ty zawsze je gasu zawsze. Lisica nie paroczna jest i strica, jak od naszego uparciu. Lisice blinki, paliwają dziwa gości, oczy dają, tamteni naszemu i ragi skażeją. Dzień dora, makara, trzecia zachara, trzecia Господня, деда милая, бабку бел матку, тюш, да, Катюшу, бабушку, Патрю. Сипси парана пиструночки, чук-чук, как стуката за гола, чук-чук, да за гола, а другая брига барибала, чук-чук, сипси парана пиструночки, чук-чук, как дома лилиса, как дома лилиса, как дома лилиса, как дома лилиса и вода.
rozmają sulla torre, sa swoimi małymi kwiatuszkami. Tuk, tuk, guzynci, baranawi, strunaczki, tuk, tuk, herbaja do komputerka, a wtaraja jamaniki. Treteta pata miraża paczek, fortijatami tunaczek, tuk, tuk, guzynci, baranawi, strunaczki, tuk, tuk, karstunata zagula, tuk, tuk, da zagula, a drugaja briga maribala. Uszka doma lila, uszka doma lila, uszka doma liliza, uszka doma liliza Iwanowna.
O, tak jest i pajo, dałż to talisku zadio.
I rozjeli na piętach, Jezu kosu na pleciach, choć od lisy na bezjedzie, a sami na jedzie. Смотрели, статили, бескуды. Ах, ты мои мальчонки, мальчонки, мои, они отделали, переезжали, спасели, бескуды, Ах, ты мой папа, патушка, которым отвечал, что не слушали говорили,
Ty kanalia! Tak puśćcie ty wiazier i dziad!
Lisinka, lisica, wieczadol gady sila, a suca dalla diga. Lisinka, lisica, pani, pani di tu, nada rogie volgi, garamai lili, liskini rebiata, liskinta skelciali, liskinka zazviti, habla mal glieci. Som, nada taki jest rekon, muzyk jest mu spiew. Som, telison, posłuchaj się. Telison, zatrzymali noc, ciekawa noc, zapolaczają noc, zapolaczają noc, ani ustosują, ani nie sila padną do ziemi. Gospodi, pomiluj, na choniki Danila, na lawiew nabijeci brigamo. Leciada la chica, kagania chica, maja wiecini, maja kali, maja lita, sabania kiri, sabania tonorili, dalitu kuruzili. Now the story is done.
You must pay for your fun!